Okay, LSP has been native in Neovim for quite a while now, but it's safe to say there's still a lot of confusion about how it all works and do you need plugins or do you not need plugins. So in today's video, I'm going to show you the different approaches on how you could integrate LSP into your Neovim config. We're going to go through the basic setup for the bare bones, so you don't need any plugins. We're going to go through some plugins that help you out, and then we're going to go through a setup which basically automates the whole process for you. Let's get into it. So to start with, I've just got a really basic config here. I've just got some options just to make it a little bit easier. And I've also just got a plugin which is just my color theme and then obviously the way to set it up. Nice and simple. Okay, so since we're going to be starting with our Neovim config, let's just keep things really simple and we'll just install the Lua language server. So first things first, you're going to want to come to the Lua language server website, scroll down to the install, and you're just going to want to do brew install Lua language server or with any package manager of your choice. But once you've got the Lua language server executable from your command line, you're good to go. And then all we need to do is we need to come over to the Neovim-lspconfig repo, which is maintained by the Neovim organization. And this is just where all the LSP configuration files are. For now, we're not going to be using any plugins. We're just going to grab this one file that we need, which is the Lua language server. If I just grab this file, it's just going to be the base configuration. It's got some comments in there if you want to read through them also. So .config/neovim. You can now add a folder or a directory called LSP. And then once you have that, anything in here, as long as the file matches the language server name, anything in this file will be run with a configuration that you set. So if I open this and I add lua ls.lua, and if we paste that file from the repo in here, and then if I reopen up the Explorer window just to show you, we now have LSP and lua ls, the lua underneath that, in our init.lua. Now from our init.lua, we can now do vim.lsp.enable, and we'll pass in lua ls, just like so. Really simple. And that's it. We've set up the Lua language server. So if I now restart, and I go back to the file, and I do check health, vim.lsp, we can now see that active in this buffer is the Lua ls language server. If you don't believe me, let's just make an error in here. And as you can see, we're obviously getting this undefined global vim. It's quite a common thing. It's one of the first things I usually fix when I set up Lua language server. So we'll just go and quickly do that now. No problem. And it actually does talk about in these comments here of a couple of ways to do it. So you can either add it to the workspace library like this. I personally use this option here, so I'll just quickly show you that down here. So all you want to do is you want to do settings, Lua, and then obviously your workspace options right there. So once I write this and restart, and then go back here, if I now try and trigger something, so if I delete a bracket, we're going to get the miss symbol, but the Vim is now recognized. So yeah, really simple way to set up the LSP config. We have the language server working now. We can even do things like, if we go back to our init.lua, we can even do things here like vim dot, and if we do control X, control O, we can get all the LSP completions right here also, which is pretty cool, pretty simple. And to say we've done this with no plugins other than a color scheme, pretty fine and dandy. So that is literally how you set up a language server. You can do that for every single language server you want, and you can fill up your LSP with tons and tons of language server configs, and then you just add them in here, and then just need to enable them down here. Simple as that, right? And then you can configure them on a case-by-case basis. Now, just in case you don't want to manage all of your language server configurations like this, well, that is where you would use a plugin like Neovim-lspconfig. So for example, if we look at this one right here, it was updated 4 days ago, right? I don't know what was added here 4 days ago, but language server configs do change. If you're not using a plugin like Neovim-lspconfig, you're going to have to update these yourself when something accidentally breaks, for example, which isn't a problem if you want to maintain it all yourself. That's cool, no problem. However, if you want the easiest way to do it, I'll quickly show you that now. So all we need to do is just install this plugin. So I'm going to be using the nightly version of installing plugins, which is basically just like this. So you add it in like that. If you're using lazy, it's basically just adding that part there, the Neovim-lspconfig to your lazy dependencies, for example. And now we jump back to this Lua ls language server file, and we can just delete all this. All this was here as default, right? We can just delete all that. We no longer need that. We just need the settings that we overrode. If we didn't override any, then we don't even need the file at all. Okay, Let me show you how easy it is to now add another language server with the nvim-lspconfig plugin. So all we need to do now is add tsls to here to add TypeScript. We'll quit out of here. We'll do brew install TypeScript language server just to make sure we got it installed. And then we can now just open like a etest.ts, for example. And if I do check health vim.lsp, look, TypeScript language server is attached to this buffer. So if I do something invalid now, oops, I accidentally closed it. If I do something invalid in here, we're getting language server stuff. And if I do like const test equals, say this returns a string, look, boolean's not assigned to a valid string. So, really simple to set up a new language server. And if you notice, this time we didn't do, if I just show you, we'll expand these to a tree. We didn't actually add tsls to the LSP folder. Now that's because we're using nvim-lspconfig, if we don't define an LSP configuration for it before we enable it, it's just going to use the one from the repository. So if I go back up to here just to show how that works, because we're using nvim-lspconfig, it's just going to manually grab this for us. So if we go to tsls, where are you? There you are. It's just manually grabbed this language server here. And this is the configuration it's going to use. Unless you want to override anything like we did with the Lua one, where you can manually override certain settings. So there you go. I've shown you how to set it up with no plugins. I've shown you how to set it up with one plugin. Now I'm going to show you how to set it up with more plugins. Now, this is all completely optional. Some people prefer to do it this way. I'm one of them. We can now add something called Mason. So if I just grab Mason here, we'll make another one. We'll change in here. We'll paste it in there. And then Mason actually does require you to do require mason.setup. And now if I reload our config, and we should be able to do Mason now. Perfect. And as you can see, we've got all the language servers that we have installed here. But let's imagine that you've not got any installed. The reason why you'd want something like Mason is if you don't want to be manually going in your terminal and installing language servers, which is understandable, right? Not everyone wants to be doing that. Well, Mason just provides a nice convenient way for you to just go, right, I want to install this language server. You click I, it's installed. Easy. So that's one of the other plugins you can use to help streamline your setup. We can grab another plugin called mason-lspconfig. And this basically acts as a bridge between Mason and lspconfig and adds some pretty convenient features. Now you can add near options such as ensure installed. So if I add ensure installed and I delete that line right there, now I'm not calling vim.enable anywhere. I've just got it in my ensure installed. And if I quit out of here, I open it back up, we'll go back to the init.lua. And if I just make an error, as you can see, the language server is enabled. I'll just do the check health thing again. The language server is enabled, even though we didn't call enable. And that's because under the hood, mason-lspconfig is going to automatically enable any languages you have installed with Mason. So there is another plugin I like to use, just for more convenience again. And let's just go to my Mason, I'll just demonstrate why I like to use it. So if I go to Mason, and I remove ESLint-D, for example, I'll just delete that, it's been uninstalled. Now let's say I want this to be a requirement, ESLint-D. Now ESLint-D isn't a language server per se, it's a linting, a formatting server. So if I just write and quit out of here, and I open back up, we're going to get an error at the bottom there. ESLint-D is not a valid entry. Make sure to only provide server names. And that's because this isn't an LSP. Like I said, it's a diagnostic server. So there is another tool called Mason Tool Installer. And if I just show you this, it's by Who is Seth Daniel. And basically, this is just a way you can configure the ensure installed in a better way, in my opinion. And just like that, so now we're not going to be using the ensure installed from here. We're going to be using the ensure installed from here. And that's because in here, you can just specify whatever name Mason uses. So I can just specify Alex, Angular, just specify the name in here, and that's fine. So if I quit out of here now, and I restart, as you can see, look, ESLint-D is now installing. So that's just another quality of life thing I like to use. I don't want some things to automatically install and some things to not automatically install. If things can automatically install, you may as well get it all to automatically install, right? So yeah, I think I've done a pretty good job there of explaining the native LSP config and obviously how you can use plugins to make it an easier experience. It's completely up to you which way you want to choose. A lot of people like to use the native way. Some people like to do it just with the LSP config, just for the base configurations. But then also I find that the Mason plugins do help in automating when you're swapping from machines, such as from your personal computer to your work computer. Just being able to share things like that, it's just easy. So yeah, hope you enjoyed today's video. I'll see you in the next one.